Thanks for joining me. In this crafting change video, I will show you how I piece together my scraps and upcycle to make a backpack and a happy scrappy tote. At the end, I will show several of my finished projects in hope of inspiring you to try your own. I love denims and twills, all colors, all weights, all kinds. If you don't already have a collection at home, then do a little garage selling and cruise to thrift stores to see what you can find. Garment size doesn't matter because you will be cutting it up into smaller pieces. And it doesn't have to be just jeans. Skirts, bibs, jackets, shirts of all sizes are just fine too. Read your tags and look for 100% cotton if possible. Polyester, spandex, or lycra blends will stretch and are harder to sew a seam that will lay flat. Test it, and if it stretches too much, be careful where you use it or just pass. Look for interesting items such as pronounced top stitching on the seams and decorative fancy back pockets. Make sure all embellishments are secure and won't fall off, like studs or sparklies, and that any fancy stitching is still intact. Try to avoid anything too thick that your sewing machine can't handle. You may have to sew through 3 to 4 layers of it during construction. And it's nice to have a variety of colors and different washes of denim. The first thing is to wash your upcycles before you start. I put my things through 2 cycles to make sure they are very clean. If your jeans still have a grease spot or hole, don't worry, just cut around the bad area and use the good. I leave my jeans and clothing whole until I decide what I need to cut from them and organize them into 3 stashes. The first one is for uncut clothing, the next is for cut-up clothing and pieces, and the last is just pockets. I do this for both the denims and the twills, keeping the 2 kinds separated. This works for me. Find what works best for you. I keep a notebook with ideas sketched in it. If I see something I like, I draw out the basic design so I can remember it. Don't sweat the colors or specific materials right now. Just get a sense of the overall design, which will help a lot when creating later. Pinterest, Etsy, and Google are all good places to see ideas and to get your motor running. Be careful during your planning and know where your boundaries are. For totes, remember that you probably will be boxing in your bottom, so don't have a seam too low. For totes and backpacks, the top will be turned under and top stitched, so don't have too heavy a material here or a thick seam that intersects at the top where you would have to stitch through it. Now let's make a scrappy backpack. First, mark off a 17 by 22 inch area on your work table or cutting board, which represents the cut size for the front. This is to make sure that when you're piecing the design, it comes out the right size. Painter's tape works well for this as it doesn't leave a sticky residue. Start at the top with piece number 1, which needs to be a very lightweight denim. This is where we will turn under and make the cord casing, and lighter-weight fabric will allow the backpack to gather easier. Pieces number 2 and 3 are contrasting colors of denim. I'm not worried about fitting them exactly. I just want to get an idea of what goes where and if the pieces will be about the right size. Piece number 4 is a pant leg side seam with top stitching that I run across the width. The seam adds interest and the color blends with the rest of the pieces. Now there's just the bottom to fill in. So I've picked 2 more pieces to join together, and one has a vertical seam. Time to gather tools and prep my machine. For this project, a rotary cutter and ruler are very helpful. A heavier needle when working with denim is a must, such as a sharp size 100/16 or a jeans denim needle. You'll also need good quality polyester thread and optional top stitching thread. Start laying out and sewing the rows together from top to bottom. For now, I'm only worried about the up and down being straight and true. As long as the material is wide enough, leave the sides alone for now, and we will go back and trim them to size later. Piece number 1 is straightened on both the top and bottom. Pieces 2 and 3 in the next row have just the tops and the adjoining edges straightened and then sewn together. I'm not planning on lining this, so I'm using a serger to finish the seams so they don't ravel. Now stitch the top row to the second row, then go back and top stitch the seam down. It's your choice if you want to use regular or top stitching thread here. Using my straight edge and rotary cutter, I trim off the bottom of the second row to prepare it to be sewn to the third row, and continue working down my design. Sometimes a seam will curve, mainly due to the original construction of the garment. Do your best to make it lay flat, but if it won't behave, it may be better to find another piece that works. When you are done piecing and before trimming the sides, go to the ironing board and press. Use steam and heat to block and make everything lay flat. Go ahead and cut the last row so you have a finished length of 22 inches. Now you can trim the excess off the sides to make the piece 19 inches wide. Since I had that one seam with a curve on the left side, I chose to start with trimming on the right hand side first. That way most of my funny curve ended up being trimmed off the left side. Now to add a pocket. With a little prep, you can trim it down and sew it on to make it look like it was meant to be. This is how I trimmed the fabric away from my pockets to get a clean look. First, take your scissors and carefully cut out the excess material away from the inside of the pocket, close to the original stitching. I hold my scissors at an angle. It seems to help me get close to but not cut through any of the stitching. Next, I do the same around the outside, being careful to not cut into the pocket material. What I'm trying to do is to save the original stitching that was on the pocket, but clean up some of the bulk so I can stitch it on to my bag. Sometimes trimming around the outside is easier to do if you work from the front. Now take a look at your corners. This is where there's a lot of material. So take a very sharp pair of needle nose scissors and cut into the seam at the top. Snip through the stitching and try to cut away as many layers of material as possible while still leaving the outside intact. Take tiny snips and stay in control so you don't cut yourself. Once you get that initial layer off, you will see where the corner fabric was flipped over and sewn. Lift this flap up and cut it off. I can usually get 3 to 4 layers off of a corner, which makes it much easier to top stitch it onto the backpack. If you've trimmed too close to the corner and have some cut denim exposed, just dab it with some fray check and let it dry. That will take care of it. My trimmed pocket is ready to be sewn onto the bag. I center it from left to right and place it on the lower half of the backpack. I also make sure that any thick corner of the pocket does not overlap or lay on top of any thick seam of the bag. I've changed over to my gold top stitching thread to sew the pocket onto the bag. I like to start stitching a little ways down from the top, go back up to the top across the end, then down, following the original gold top stitching of the pocket. When I get back to where I started, I overlap the stitches about an inch or so to secure. Now go slow. Make sure you have a sharp size 100/16 or 110/18 denim needle in. You may have to help it along in a few spots by turning the hand wheel by hand, but you've got this. Ta-da! The front of the backpack is done. Since I have the top stitching thread in my machine, I'm going to make the strap carriers now. Using a lighter weight of denim, I cut a piece about 5 inches by 8 inches and press it in half. Then I bring each side into the middle and press it again. And then I fold the whole thing in half, just like a big piece of double folded bias tape. This is a lot easier than making a tube and trying to turn it. Each cord carrier is top stitched, then the raw edges are finished with the serger. Speaking of the serger, I really like it to seam finish unlined backpacks that I've used heavier materials on. Here's a tip. Don't try to turn the corners, just serge off the end, keep chaining, and turn your fabric and feed it back in again. Notice that I'm not really cutting off any measurable amount of material, just skimming to overcast the raw edges. For the back of the backpack, I'm using a lighter weight denim from an upcycled denim skirt. I lay the bag front out on it, making sure any thick top stitch seams are not going to be placed in the top casing, and then cut out the back. Don't forget to check and make sure that your cording fits through the cord carrier, and then mark the stitching line. Please note that for denim, please match an appropriate weight of cording to the material. Please use heavier clothesline or paracord, and do not use bias tape, twill tape, or fabric cording, which will not hold up to the heavy denim. Now continue to finish your backpack as normal. Ta-da! I'm done! Pretty nice. Now I don't make all my backpacks like this, but sometimes it's just fun to go scrappy. The next project is a happy scrappy tote bag using cotton quilting scraps and upcycling a pair of orange twill pants. For the foundation, I cut a piece of lightweight canvas 19 by 19, which will be the base that I stitch my materials on. On this canvas base, draw a 16 by 16 inch square inside, which will be the design area. The 3-inch area on the outside will be the border. For the design, I'm using some scraps of leftover mask making fat quarters. I like to start with one dominant print, like the multicolored swirl fabric, and then pull out colors that go with it. After cutting the fabrics into 3-inch strips, I play with them a little bit to see what order looks good. I start with the main strip and pin it down diagonally on the canvas, centering it over the opposing corners. The next strip is laid on top of it, right sides together, and both pieces are sewn down along one side to the canvas. Flip the second strip over so the right side is up, and then press. Continue in the same manner until you reach one end. Then go back and work the other side from the middle out to the point. Once all the strips are sewn on the canvas, go back and mark the 16 by 16 inch square again so you'll have a guide to sew the border on. For the border, straighten one edge of the border material, then stitch it down to the design, right sides together, using the chalk line as a guide. The border pieces on the first two sides should overlap at least 5/8 of an inch over the chalk line. Then straighten the other two pieces you're using for the border, making them long enough to go all the way across the design, and sew them down. Go back and trim all 4 sides when you're finished so you can have a 19 by 19 inch square. Your front is done, and you can continue making the tote as usual. This tote won't be lined as everything is sewn to the canvas base, and the twill I'm using for the back is sturdy. I don't have a single piece big enough for the back, so I am piecing squares together in the same method as we did the denim backpack. Straighten, trim, and sew the pieces together until you have a back 19 by 19. Why not add a pocket to the back? This pocket top is bound with one of the quilting pieces and then sewn on the back. Ta-da! Isn't that cute? Surely there's somebody out there that would love to have a happy, scrappy, orange tote. On this tote, I wanted to keep the metal studs on that little pocket, so I cut the material out larger and made it a pocket on a pocket. And the left side is half of a denim vest. Here are a couple of totes that feature the pockets which were taken off of a pair of camouflage hunting pants. And here's another pocket on a pocket. The bag is also lined with some patriotic red and blue fabric. In this night patch tote, notice how the placement of the grain of the patches draws your eye to the center pocket. This tote features a pants leg side seam, a pocket that uses a bottom hem as the top cuff, and a waistband for the shoulder strap. Have I mentioned lately that I like pockets? I like the way the different blues complement each other in this combination of denim and decorator fabric tote bag. A kid-sized pair of denim jeans is the top half of this scrappy tote. This is the back, and this is the front. The other two bands of denim were attached to the bottom, and I think they coordinate pretty nice. The fly was sewn shut, and Velcro was added at the top by hand to close the bag. Pockets are cool. Not only are they a great design element, but they are so useful on any tote. Make sure to add one or two to your totes. The tote on the left is pieced in strips working from the top down, and the two totes on the right are made from our two-tone tote pattern. This tote is a good example of finding a pattern that really speaks to you and then pulling out coordinating solids to go with it. Whatever you decide to make, just relax and lose yourself in the creativity, the texture, the patterns, the colors, the process, but above all, have fun.